welcome back to Which is the Moon. I'm your Friday hostess, Natalie, and this week we are discussing deity. Now, as you can probably figure from my previous videos, I'm recording this video early, and as you can see, it is not quite Thanksgiving yet. Thanksgiving is tomorrow, so this is Wednesday, but I'm ready. I've got my homage to the bird right here, ready to go. So, anyhow, this week we are discussing our deities, and so I'm going to try to do this with as much dignity as possible, considering I have a giant turkey on my head. So just bear with me, okay? My deity, for those of you that are not familiar, is the Morrighain, which is a goddess, a Celtic goddess. She is often considered a dark goddess, but as many of you that watch my personal channel or have seen some of my other videos know, I do not like that kind of nomenclature, and I'll get into why in just a little bit. If you are curious about the Morrighain, well, I'll just get into that right now, actually. I don't like the terminology light goddess or dark goddess, because to me that negates certain aspects of the goddess. All gods and goddesses, like all human beings, have light and dark to them. So when we classify a god or a goddess as light or dark, we are diminishing the other aspects of their personality and thereby taking something away from that god or goddess. So I don't really like that, because it also causes people to form either a positive or a negative notion in their mind about this particular god or goddess. Typically the Morrighain, which is a triple aspect goddess, there's a little bit of debate as to who the different aspects of the Morrighain are. Some refer to her as Morgu. Some refer to her as Morgana. You see her in Arthurian legend as Morgan Le Fay. But there's many different ways that she appears. She has the aspects of Maka and Bave, which Bave is her crone aspect, Maka I see is the mother aspect. And then you have Anya, A-I-N-E. Anya is one of the goddesses that is associated with the Morrighain, so is Anya. So you see that kind of different arguments as to what is. And I have some incense going, so if you see that smoke floating across the screen, don't freak out. It's just incense. I have some prosperity incense burning, so, or good fortune. Good fortune, I think it is. Anyhow, so there's a little bit of discussion or debate about what are the different aspects that you see, but those are the ones that I recognize and work with. Now, where can you learn more about this particular goddess, or what are her typical associations? She's associated with the colors of red and black. She's associated with things such as onyx, jet, red jasper, anything that's of a black color stone, strong stone. She is a goddess of war, sex, death, rebirth. She is a fertility goddess who is intimately tied to the land. She's associated with horses, with wolves, and with cattle. She's very often associated with cattle. She has an intimate relationship with the Dagda. She has borne him children. So for those of you that are familiar with the Dagda, which is considered like the really good god in Celtic mythology, they have copulated and had children. So I guess you could see it as a light and dark coming together, but again, I kind of like to get away from that sort of terminology, although you see it often in the mythos. So where can you learn more about the goddess of Morrighain? Well, there is this book, Magic of the Celtic Gods and Goddesses, A Guide to Their Spiritual Power, Healing Energies, and Mystical Joy by Carl McColeman and Catherine Hines. Now, while I find this book very interesting and a good read in terms of giving you kind of an overview of the mythos that surrounds the various different gods and goddesses, and they do talk about Maka in here. They talk about honoring Maka. They tell you how to honor each of these gods and goddesses. I was not happy with their portrayal of the Morrighain. I found it to be a little, I don't know, I almost want to say a little disrespectful, although I don't think it was intended to be. They place a very big focus on, you should be fearful of this goddess, and I have not found that to be so. She is powerful, and she's not one that will take you lightly, and if she's calling you, you best pay attention, because if you're ignoring it, she's eventually going to just beat you over the head with it to the point that you go, okay, I get the point. And that's just how she is. She's not a nurturing mother like you might see in other figures like in Breet or in Caradwyn or something like that, but she is still nurturing in her own way. She's a tough love kind of mother. And so I don't think that, she would call to you unless she thought that you could handle what she could give you. So this was a good book that had some good information. It has some good ideas on how to honor her. I just kind of had some issues with how they approached her in terms of the level of respect. Now, another good book is The Morrighain, Meeting the Great Queens by Morgan Daimler. This is not a very thick book, but as you can see, I've parsed it and highlighted it. Whenever I read a book, I'm always parsing and highlighting. I almost can't read a book without a pen or a highlighter. But she gives a very, very, very good background to the relationships, to the Morrighain itself, to her triple aspect, all of the various aspects. She gives you good examples of how she relates to the Morrighain and gives honor to this goddess, because this is her primary, her patron goddess. So this is a good one. Another really, really good one, and this is a little bit thicker read, and it's been very enjoyable. I'm not through it completely yet because I've had other things that have taken up some of my time, and when I read this, I like to give it good thought. And actually, I have 2 copies of each of these, but it was kind of a mistake. I had a friend that gifted me a copy of Stephanie Woodfield's book, and then my husband got me a copy of this one, and then for my birthday he gave me a copy of each, which I don't think he realized he'd already done that. So I didn't say anything. I just smiled and said, "Thank you, honey. I'm going to be gifting this copy of, well, not this copy, but the extra copy of this one out to someone. I was going to gift them this one too, but they happen to already have it. So I keep it in my office as a reference because I have one at my home and one here, and I like to do it that way. But anyhow, this is an excellent book that has some wonderful history of the various different gods and goddesses that relate to the Morrighain and to the Morrigu, and how you can give honor to her. She gives you incense recipes, which are great. She gives you also different meditations that you can do to help you relate. And when I do a book like this, I also like to use a journal. I have a journal that Julie Deskins, Journals by Julie, gave me, and it has the triple ribbon on it, and I use it specifically for, and only for, exclusively for my meditations and my study related to the Morrighain. And I have notes from all of these books in there because I'm trying to deepen my relationship with the Morrighain. It's a relationship that's very fluid. It's stronger at sometimes and not as strong at others, although her presence is always there, and I feel always has been my whole life. I didn't really pick up on it when I was younger, and now that I look back on my life, I realize I was first introduced to the Morrighain when I read a book called The Hounds of the Morrighain by Pat Shea, which is funny because she mentions, or one of these 2 ladies mentions that same book as their introduction to the Morrighain, and I was like, man, I forgot all about that book. Yeah. So I found a copy of it. It's a very thick book. And in the book, the Morrighain actually is the bad guy in the story. But I remember being so fascinated with her because she seems such a powerful person, and it fascinated me. So I'm always kind of been, Maleficent was always my favorite Disney character, Donald Duck, he's kind of bad to me, but I've always been kind of drawn to that because I think that we often deny those less pleasant aspects of our personality, and we try to hide them away, but really it's a part of a whole. And it's the same thing with the gods and the goddesses. If we look just at the typical associations, we miss out on all the other things that these gods and goddesses have to offer us. Another area or resource for finding good information on the Morrighain is Druid Power by Amber Wolf. She has a whole section on the different Celtic gods and goddesses, and she has a little talk about here. She gives an imagery activation for the goddess, and it's really a very good read. This is a great read. It's a little dry in the beginning, but keep going. It gets better as you go. And she gives you a lot of really, really, really good information about Celtic mythology and how to connect to those forces, because the Morrighain is the queen of the Fae. She is the mother of all of that power, and she's related very intimately to the land, to the people. And although her love is kind of a tough love sort of thing, she's also nurturing in her own right. If she chooses you, she's choosing you for a reason, and you should be honored and be ready and willing. But don't disrespect her by, associating her with other gods and goddesses. In other words, when I work with Morrighain, I'm working only with Morrighain. I'm giving honor only to Morrighain. I have worked with Isis, and I have worked with Caradwyn in some ways. I have called upon those aspects of the goddess to help me with certain situations where perhaps the Morrighain is not as closely related, like when I am needing creativity and that kind of thing. But I never take my focus off of the Morrighain. It's more kind of reaching out to a friend than it is giving a reverence to, although I try to be respectful, and I do that. I don't ever put another goddess or her imagery on my Morrighain altar. I have a bookshelf that I use at my home as an altar for the Morrighain, and everything there is related strictly to her. And I would not recommend that you mix her with other deities, because she's not one that mixes well, and she doesn't take that very kindly. It's kind of disrespectful to her. It's very flippant. Some associations associated with her that I talked about: colors, red and black. I talked about certain things like that. I relate sandalwood to her. That's an incense. Dragon's blood is an incense that I burn in honor to the Morrighain often, although I don't know that those particularly have a direct correlation to her. I do know that she's related to herbs like henbane and aconite. She is associated with ravens and crows most often, also wolves, and as I mentioned, horses and cattle. Cattle are very important to her, which is funny because I've always liked cows, and I've always decorated my kitchen in a cow theme. So it's another way in which she has always kind of been present in my life. As you can see, I have my ravens here that I keep up year round, and I have this one here that was gifted to me that I keep here in my office to honor her. Ways in which I honor her: I will give her offerings. I make offerings of things like my time. I devote some of my time to the martial arts. I am a fencer, and I have taken up that practice again, although by myself. There's not a group around here really for me to participate in, but you can hang up a tennis ball and I can pull out all of my gear. And so I try to keep myself physically fit in that way for her, because she is a warrior goddess. So I try to keep that spirit alive within myself. So I engage in fencing. I will leave her. Oh, I also go to the shooting range. I do own a pistol. I am a CHL holder here in the state of Texas, and I go to the shooting range, and I will always meditate on things that might be related to her in that regard. And it's also a great way to blow off some steam. You just take it out on a target. It's better than taking it out on a person. But I also want to be battle ready if I'm ever called upon to do so, which I pray and hope I never have to. But anyway, I don't want to get into a political discussion, and I know that's where this is going to lead, so I'm just going to yish my yap. Let's see. Other things that I associate with her: certain foods. I associate spicy foods with her, and I will often leave like red peppers or chili peppers as an offering to her. Bullets I have used as an offering for her, which is funny because that came up in a video that I didn't even see the video. I didn't see the blog post or whatever it was, but I did see Joey Morgan. Hello. Woo! Joey Morris's video response to that. Jeez Louise. Sorry, Joey. Joey Morris had a video in which she discussed somebody that apparently was offended that somebody suggested leaving bullets as an offering for the Morrighain. I think it's quite fitting. I think anything associated with battle, a warrior status, anything related to sex and birth. So, images of babies I will sometimes use. Sometimes I will use like not baby food, but I may use a baby food jar in which to keep the offering. I may put certain flowers or herbs, things like that I associate with her. So I'm sure there are other references I'm leaving out, and I do apologize. She is a powerful, powerful ally. She can also be a tough person, goddess to deal with. She will sometimes appear in ways that you are not expecting, that kind of blows you away. If she appears in your dreams, it's often quite, in my experience, it's been often quite fierce and eye-opening, the kind of thing that makes you wake up from a deep sleep. Either your heart's racing or you're sweating or both, and it could be a positive or an intimidating kind of thing. So sometimes her energy just sort of flows through you, and you're like, so that's it. She's tough to deal with. She's hard to quantify in a video, and so I try to do a video on my personal channel for my changing relationship with her, because Samhain is a time that is associated with the Morrighain. She is the Raven Queen, and so that is a time that is very sacred to her, and I will honor her always at Samhain. She is closely associated with divination through Babe, and through the Morrighain aspect as well. She is one who has been known to appear as both a beautiful young woman and as an ugly older, I hate the term hag, but that's how she's described in some of the mythos. She has also appeared to people in the form of a cow. She is associated with the cattle raids of Cooley. If you're not familiar with that, look it up. She is associated with I had another thought in my head that I wanted to mention, and now it's kind of like floated away. So give me a few minutes to draw back to that. She is, no, that's it, the washer at the ford. In Celtic mythology and in battle mythology and battle lore, if a soldier or a warrior came across a woman washing bloody armor in a river, it was the Morrighain, and it was a sign that you are going to die in battle. Now, a lot of people see that as a very negative thing, but what you have to keep in mind is the context in which that myth was drawn out. Although no one really wants to die, remember that the ancient Celts saw death in battle as an honor. So it was almost as if an honor was being given to this warrior. And remember that death to the Celts was not the end. They believed very much in an afterlife in Amania, the Summerland, the Moonland, and that they didn't see it as the ending of all. So they didn't really fear death the way we in Western society fear death today. So bearing that in mind, it wasn't necessarily a negative thing. It was almost a badge of honor that you were being chosen to sacrifice yourself in battle for whatever the cause was. It was usually in protection of your homeland, which was considered a great honor. Now, remember too that horses and cattle were signs of fertility, signs of prosperity, and signs of wealth in Celtic society. So she is associated with all of those things as well, and I think those are aspects of her that people tend to overlook very often. They focus in on the sex, death, and battle, and they don't focus in on the prosperity, nurturing, and protection of land and homeland that are also associated with her through her associations with cattle and horses and that sort of thing. So it's just, she's so hard to quantify in one video, and it's very difficult for me just to give this one kind of summary of the Morrighain, because she's so multifaceted and so deep and so complex that it doesn't do her justice to try to sum her up in a video or even a series of videos. It's something that's very personal, something that's very strong, and it's a calling that you will not be able to deny, because even if you're kind of like, well, I think she's interesting, and you might read a lot of things that say, oh, you don't want to get associated with her unless you're sure, and a lot of people are like, how can I be sure? She will tell you. A good example I can give you is when I was first kind of involving myself. I wasn't sure about my calling because I had seen so many videos where people had said, oh, I just had this wonderful sign. I had this great deep spiritual experience and I knew I was being called and there was no doubt in my mind. And I didn't ever have that experience. For me, it was much more subtle. And it was as I looked back on my life and I realized that these little things had always been there. I've always loved crows and ravens and they've always followed me everywhere. Grackles, we have common grackles around here, which are a type of corvid. You often see the three ravens, crows, and grackles, or what we call purple martins around here, kind of congregating. My grandmother had a purple martin house, and I used to go out and talk to the birds all the time. I have always loved wolves and coyotes. They've always kind of drawn me to them. As I mentioned, I love cows, and have always, since I was a young girl, said that I was my kitchen theme was going to be cows, which it is to this day, and I have them all over my kitchen. So, it's subtle things like that. And then, like I said, the book by Pat O'Shea, which I had kind of forgotten about until I read it again I'm pretty sure maybe it was this one. It might have been Stephanie Woodfield's book. But once I got the copy of the book, I was like, that's right. I remember this book. I remembered the storyline and knew what was going to happen. And I was like, oh, man, yeah. And Arthurian legend, I always felt bad for Morgan Le Fay. I felt like she got the short end of the stick. And it was one of those things that it just, looking back on my life, it was those subtle little things, my love of storms, my lack of fear, my determination to survive and to continue on regardless of whatever life threw in my face. And, certain other aspects of my personality I won't go into here. So there are certain things that I just, once I looked back and I realized. And so one day I was at a facility where I have several clients, and I was leaving the facility and one of the workers was walking out with me to go to the other end of the building. And we walk out the door and my car is literally covered in blackbirds. No other car. They were kind of all around, underneath, all over the top, sitting there. And they're all just kind of looking at us. And the worker turns and he looks at me and goes, well, they like you. And I said, yeah, I guess they do. And I kind of smiled. So it's one of those things where it's just kind of always been there, and it may be subtle. There may be little things that you may not be attending to. And so just meditate, open your mind, open your heart, and if you're meant to be, she'll let you know. But if you're just interested in learning more about her, maybe you don't necessarily feel you're being called, but you're interested in her story and in her various aspects and the different other gods and goddesses that relate to her, maybe through Welsh and other types of mythology, then I certainly encourage you to pick up some of these books. Now, without kind of minimizing the importance of this deity, I have another deity that I work with, because I have a male deity and I have a female deity. Morgan is my mother. She is my female deity, my primary deity that I associate with because I'm a woman. But I also have Cernnunos, who is the consort of the Morrigan, with whom I have always felt a close association. I love deer. I love the forest. And he is very closely associated with all of those. He is the lord of the hunt, which has always kind of excited me, although I don't know that I can actually bring myself to take an animal down. I do love the excitement of it, and, kind of the whole, going out and the prey predator sort of thing. But that's a part of the cycle of life, and especially back in those times, it was vital that you hunted in order to survive. And so I think our hunting has changed slightly, and I'm not opposed to hunting. I don't like people who hunt for sport and waste the animal, because to me that's disrespectful to the animal. But I have great respect for, like, the way the Native Americans would hunt, where all of the animal was used and the animal was given great respect. And so I can respect that. I don't have a problem with people doing that as a matter of survival either. So it's odd to me, because those two seem to just go so hand in hand to me that it's hard for me to even describe. But he is the one that I will go to when I need a more fatherly figure. And he is more fatherly, in my opinion, than the Morgan is motherly, per se. In terms of nurturing, he is very protective in his nature, although the Morgan as well. But he's more of that, daddy's hands kind of the kind you sit down and put your shoulder, your head against the shoulder and you kind of cry. Morrighain, she doesn't tolerate that very well. So, she's not she's more the what you crying for kind of mom. So it's one of those things where you have a perfect blending. They balance one another quite well. And so I love to give him honor. The ways that I honor both the Morrighain and Cernnunos in my home is that I do have things that I keep up for them all year. As I mentioned, I have a bookshelf in what used to be my study where I used to film my videos at home that I have reserved strictly for the Morrighain. But I also have two golden stag figures that I keep on my mantelpiece. They were given to me as a Christmas gift a couple of years ago by my husband. But I keep them on that mantelpiece year round, and that is in honor to Cernnunos, my patron. So if you are interested in learning more about him, you can also learn about him from this book here. There are books that are dedicated just to him. There is a wealth of information to Cernnunos. And just for shits and grins, it's worthy to mention that Cernnunos is the god that is also associated with the Welsh god Hern and the Greek god Pan. They are kind of one and the same, although Pan is more goat-like than deer-like. They serve the same function and are very much the same god. They are fertility gods. They are associated with strong sexuality, which goes hand in hand with Morrighain. They are protective and joyful and bring fertility and wealth and growth to the land. So I associate colors such as brown and green, gold, silver, any kind of a pleasant patchouli is an herb that I associate very closely with Cernnunos, and I use patchouli very often in my offerings to Cernnunos. I offer fruits and vegetables, things that grow forth from the land, to him as an offering. And I will sometimes do honoring both of them as a union, as a couple, particularly around my anniversary and things like that. So that's a little bit about my deities and how I view them, how I worship them, and how I see them, and how I work with them. And I hope that my video hasn't been too kind of convoluted and rambly. I hope that you gained something from it, at the very least a little bit of a basic knowledge and understanding and an interest in those gods. Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to mention for the shits and grins part. Not only is Cernnunos associated with Hern and Pan and with other gods, but he is also the one that the Christians have taken as the symbol of Satan. Because if you are wanting to make someone stop worshiping something, and Cernnunos was a very important god through various different cultures under different names, but his aspect was the same. He was the lord of the forest and the lord of the hunt, and he's seen as having like a deer head or having deer horns, human body, that sort of thing, or goat horns and half human, half goat, and as in you see with Pan. But Hern and Cernnunos particularly are deer gods, and so you see, if you want someone to stop worshiping something, the best thing you can do is tell them that it's evil, and to morph it into something that is seen as evil and bad and to be avoided, and that's exactly what they did. So poor Cernnunos, often his imaging, which you might also associate with the Baphomet, which is a nurturing and multi-layered symbol. It is not satanic, and I want to point that out because the Celts had no concept of Satan. So things were seen as they were, both good and bad, and positive or negative, light or dark. It was a melding. Nothing could exist without one or the other. You can't have light without dark, and there's no dark without light. You can't appreciate the light without the dark, and so on and so forth. And the ancient Celts saw it that way, and so they didn't really associate it as evil or bad. It was what it was. And so the concept of evil versus good in terms of deity and that sort of thing is really very Judeo-Christian in nature. So when you see these images, a lot of people are off put by images of Cernnunos because they think you're worshiping Satan. And it takes a lot of patience and education to inform these people how very wrong they are. But that is where that imagery comes from, and I thought that that was worthy of mentioning here. So again, I appreciate you watching. I hope I've informed you in some way and sparked your interest in others. If you have any questions or you want to make comments, I look forward to them here. Thank you so very much. I hope you all have, if you're in the United States and you're celebrating Thanksgiving, please do remember that this is a sacrifice for us to be able to feed our families. Be respectful of that life and be thankful for it. Be thankful for your families and your friends and everything that you have. And I hope you all have a blessed weekend. Thank you so much for watching.